What's up guys, hope you're doing well and welcome to this exciting tutorial on how to implement the Model-View-ViewModel Framework in a Pokedex application. So before we get started, quick note, this is a reposted video. So if you've seen this video before, go ahead and skip to about the 30-minute and 20-second mark. That's where the additional footage is going to be added on, and I thought it was important enough to add on and repost this video, so make sure you go and check it out. If not, if this is the first time you're seeing this video, you don't have to do anything, just keep watching and we're going to get started now. Thanks guys. Video tutorial, I'm going to be going over the MVVM framework, or the Model-View-ViewModel framework, and we're going to be comparing that to the MVC framework, which stands for Model View Controller. And what we're going to be doing is converting this project here you see in front of you from the MVC framework to our MVVM framework. So before we get started with the code, I'm going to give you a quick demo of this application. And then we are going to go into some theory behind both of the frameworks, explain the advantages and disadvantages, when it's better to use one, when it's better to use the other. So here's our Pokedex. All of this information is coming in from an API. Here's some of our functionality. We can long press on a cell, and it gives us this info view with some information about the Pokemon. We have this button that allows us to view some more information about the Pokemon, and we can also search through our Pokemon and have all that same functionality available to us. So that's our application. You guys are going to want to go ahead and download this Xcode project. The link is in the description to this video, so we can get started with the code. Now, before we do that, I'm going to open up Xcode, and we're going to talk a little bit about the MVC framework and converting it to MVVM. So I have this picture open here that gives us a visual representation of what the Model View Controller framework represents and how it works. And I have our Xcode project open here that's operating under that Model View Controller framework, as we can see. So let's talk a little bit about what this is so we can understand why it's better to use MVVM in certain instances and how the two frameworks are different, so you guys will be able to understand when to use one and when to use the other. So essentially we have a model, and that's what we see here. That's our Pokemon class. And what that model represents is each one of these Pokemon that you see here. So it's a custom object, and it contains all of these attributes like name, image URL, image, weight, height, defense, description, blah, 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 blah. So this is our object, and this is what's known as our model, okay? So our controller owns this model, as you can see from this, sort of notation here. And what that means is, if we go into our controller file, this is the controller for our main controller that we see here. This is where we own a reference to our model. So it's an array of Pokemon, and how we populate this view controller is with that array of Pokemon. Okay, so then what's our view? Our view is each one of these cells, right? So if we go here, we see Pokedex cell. This is going to be the configuration for each one of these cells. It contains this view for the name, the image view, and the name label, right? So that's, and then we create a reference to our Pokemon here that is going to be set from our controller. So let's go ahead, go back to this diagram and talk about how this works. So pop back into our controller. Like I said, it owns the model, which is what we see here, this Pokemon array. We perform some API fetch, which is done here. That's where we configure our model data. And we go back and talk to the model and tell it to set up each one of these Pokemon. And then once that's done, or once that's completed, the controller gets updated, and then the controller owns a reference to our view, which is this collection view stuff we see here. And we set up our cell right here. And if you guys remember, this is like our Pokemon to send, which is what gets updated here in our view. So that's how that works. Our model is owned by our controller, and the controller talks to both of these guys, but the model and the view never talk to one another. That's Model View Controller wrapped up really quickly. What are the drawbacks? Okay, so sometimes it can put a lot of stress on these controllers. When we get really large, complex projects, our controllers can get really large. They can get really difficult to read, difficult to add functionality to, difficult to understand, and it can make your project slower because you're putting a lot of stress on one file, right? Imagine a controller that's thousands of lines of code. So income, model, view, view model, right? So what model MVVM does, right, is just take some stress off this controller, right, or the work that the controller has to do. Okay, so it's basically just adding an intermediary step in to take some stress off this controller, right? And everything else remains the same. It's just that the controller no longer owns the model. It owns a view model, which owns that model. So the drawbacks to this are that it's a little bit more code, a little bit more work to implement this framework. But the advantage is if you start to get a really large and complex project, it can take some stress off this controller, or as we'll see in this project, even take some stress off some of the code that you have to write in your view classes. So that's the purpose of Model-View-ViewModel. So in my opinion, if you guys have a simple project like this one, it's not necessary to implement MVVM. It's actually just going to be a little bit more work. But when you get really large, complex projects, that's when it's going to be advantageous to implement that. So now that we have the theory between both frameworks talked about, let's go ahead and start converting our code from MVC to MVVM, okay? Look back at our diagram. What we want to do is introduce this view model structure here, okay? So what we're going to do is go to our Xcode project, select your project folder name, hit new group, and we're going to call this view model, and I'm going to put it right below our model, not in the model folder. Sorry, guys. One second. There we go. Okay, now we're going to create a new file, and that is going to be a Swift file, and we're going to call it Pokemon View Model. Create. Okay, so we're going to just say struct Pokemon View Model, and just open and close our brackets. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? What attributes is it going to contain, and how is it going to make our life easier in this case? So let's hop into our info view, and this is the view class for this info view that we see here. If you guys just long press down on one of those cells, this info view should pop up. So here's all this code here that happens once we set the Pokemon for this info view. So essentially, we are passing data to this info view, which is a Pokemon object, and then it's populating all of these subviews like this image view, this label here, this table view, and this stuff we see here with the information from the Pokemon, right? And you see here that we have to perform some logic to determine whether or not the Pokemon is an original Pokemon, which is like if it's in the 151 original Pokemon. I think it's 151, don't quote me on that. And to determine the strength of the Pokemon, right? So essentially, we're going to implement a view model here to slim down some of this code. And I know it's in a view file, but this could also be a controller file. It's just that in this instance, it's going to be a subclass of UI view that's going to make our life a little bit easier here. So let's go ahead and see what we need to do with our Pokemon view model. So let's start out with our initialization. So what we're going to do is if we look back at our diagram, we remember that our view model owns our model. So we're going to initialize this with a Pokemon. Oops. Okay, and now we're going to create some attributes. So we're going to say var name is a string, var image is a UI image, and we need to import UI kit. And then here's where it gets interesting. So we're going to say var original Pokemon text is a string, and var Pokemon strength, strength, yep, I think that's right, text, which is also a string. Okay, so here we can just set our name and image from our Pokemon. So if we hop into our Pokemon class, we notice that it has a name and an image. So when we initialize our view model with a Pokemon, we'll have access to those attributes, and setting them is just going to look like this: self.name equals Pokemon.name. And because our image is optional, because it's being fetched from an API, so you want to make it optional in case you get back some kind of error, we're going to say guard let image equal Pokemon.image, else return. And then we're going to say self.image equals image. Okay, here's where it gets cool now. So we are going to hop back into this info view, and we're going to copy and paste all this stuff here, right? And we can copy and paste that into, paste that into our view model, and just make these guys that. So just change that stuff around, guys. Pokemon strength text. Or let's call this base experience text, just to make it easier, and delete those dot texts, right? And we need our base experience. So excuse me, guys. We're going to say guard let base experience, or base exp. Now let's do experience equal Pokemon dot base experience else return. Okay. So now if we build our project, we're good to go. And now we're going to see how this is going to help us out in our info view class. So we're going to create a variable here for our Pokemon view model. It's going to be Pokemon view model. Make it optional. We're going to say did set. So now what we can do is say name label dot text equals Pokemon view model dot name. Image view dot image equals Pokemon view model dot image. And you guys guessed it by now, we can actually set this text by just saying original, oops. So we can say original Pokemon label dot text equals Pokemon view model dot original Pokemon text, and base experience label dot text equals Pokemon view model dot base experience text, right? So we handled all of this logic in our view model class. So now setting up this view becomes this easy instead of having all of this code in it. And then we just need to reload our table view data. And that's it for our implementation there. So let's go ahead and comment this out and set our Pokemon view model. So we're going to hop into our Pokedex controller and go all the way down to the bottom. And in this delegate method is where we are setting the Pokemon for that info view. So you see self.infoview.Pokemon equals Pokemon. And just really quick, guys, all this stuff is performed in this completion block, which is part of our API call. Because how I set this project up really quick was when we fetch all this information, all we need is an image and text for our Pokemon. So I didn't have it fetch any of the information like the description from the API or anything like that, because it's a ton of data and it would slow our project down. So what I had it do is when we click on this Pokemon here, we then go and fetch the necessary data from the API to get it there. So it saves our project a lot of time and computing power. So that's why all this is done within a completion block that's handled by this API call. So this API call is made, and then when it's done, we set up all this stuff, right? So back to what we need to do. So we're going to say self.infoview.PokemonViewModel equals a Pokemon view model, and we need to initialize it with a Pokemon, and that's just going to be whatever information we pass in here. So if we build our project, it's going to say build failed. We can comment this out for now, and we can comment that out for now as well. And something else we need to comment out really quickly, guys, is go to this Pokemon stat cell, and in this configure cell function, it's going to ask us for a Pokemon. And if we were to run our project now, because we no longer have this Pokemon, it would crash. So go to this configure cell function and just comment all that code out as well. So let's go ahead and run our project. And we're going to see if we are populating that info view with some of our data from our Pokemon view model. It's not all going to be there, but some of it should be. So let's click on Bulbasaur. And we're getting his name, his picture. whether or not he's an original Pokemon and his strength, right? So let's do Venusaur and see. So strength is high, original Pokemon is yes. And we're just not getting any of this table view data anymore. But we are getting the stuff we set up from our Pokemon view model. So our implementation is working. We just have to fix a couple of things. And we'll be done converting this project from MVC to MVVM. It's pretty simple. And I hope you guys see some of the advantages and the disadvantages as well. It's a little bit more work to implement this stuff here, but it does save us a lot of code in I mean, you can see this is much fewer lines of code than this. And you guys can imagine if we were to scale this up, that this could get a lot more intense, and it could actually save our projects a lot of space in lines of code. So let's go ahead and continue with converting this to MVVM, guys. This part is a bit of a pain in the butt. Basically, everywhere we see or have a Pokemon variable, we are going to be replacing that with a Pokemon view model. So what I want to do is go ahead and this is an easier way to do this. So we're going to say edit all in scope and see everywhere we are using that Pokemon variable, and we're going to change that to Pokemon view model, okay? And it's going to be of type Pokemon view model. So let's go ahead and build our project. And guys, this is going to be a lot of changing stuff around, a lot of building, which is Command B, and just fixing errors until our project works under this view model framework, okay? And it's going to suck, but we're going to get it done together, and it's going to be okay, I promise. Okay, so that should have changed to Pokemon view model, delegate.present info with Pokemon. So now we have to go into our protocol method and change this guy. So we want to say with Pokemon view model, Pokemon view model, Pokemon view model, and view more info with view model, Pokemon view model, which is of type Pokemon view model. This is going to cause a bunch of errors, okay? So now, because we changed this protocol method, we have to go change where we implement that protocol. And that's in our Pokedex controller. So it's going to say we don't conform to the protocol. So let's just go ahead and add these stubs so we get our new functions. And for this present info view, we are just going to take all this out and put it in here. And there's going to be some stuff we need to change. And we can go ahead and delete that. And then this guy here is just one line of code. That's nice. So we need to mess with this function a little bit as well. So let's hop up to this dismiss info view, guys. So to do that, guys, hold command, click on it, and say jump to definition. So now we need to say with view model, Pokemon view model, Pokemon view model. Okay, so now that's going to mess some other stuff up with Pokemon view model nil. And now we need to say Pokemon view model, Pokemon view model. Sorry, I'm saying that so much. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, now we need to hop into this controller, which is the info controller. So this guy here. So when we click on one of these, we need to pass in a view model and not just a Pokemon now. And it's for this functionality when we hit this view more info button, and then it goes over to that new controller. So let's hop over there. That's our Pokemon info controller. I have some stuff commented out here. You guys should do that as well on this function down here. So this is now going to be a Pokemon view model. I'm really starting to hate that word. Build again. Ton of errors. Let's keep fixing them. So let's see. Pokemon view model. And just copy and paste these guys. And here we're going to say guard let Pokemon equal Pokemon view model dot Pokemon else return. Okay, so in our API, guys, I'm going to explain what's going on here. we want to fetch data for a Pokemon. So that is the only place we're not going to be changing this view model around, because that's just in our API service. So we don't need to introduce a view model there. We do want to pass in a Pokemon. So if we go and look at that function, go to your API guy here, service. It's this here. So this is where we fetch our Pokemon data. We actually don't need that Pokemon variable. We could just make it an info URL. But I'm not going to change it because we just don't need to change it. Might make things a little bit. Do we use that anywhere else? Yeah, we do. So we do need that Pokemon variable there. Okay, so let's hop back in here. And what we want to do is just create a Pokemon variable in our view model class. So we're going to go up to our view model and we're going to say var Pokemon. And we can force unwrap it because we know we're going to have a Pokemon in our Pokemon view model because we initialize it with one. So we'll say self.pokemon equals Pokemon. Build that now. That error should go away. Okay, so now let's go back here and jump into this one. It's just with view model. Okay, that was easy. Now we can say controller.pokemon view model equals Pokemon view model, right? Okay, 4 errors, now 5. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see, where are we? Pokedex controller, what's this? Cell.pokemon. Okay, so we need to change this Pokemon guy in our cell. So we're going to say Pokemon view model to send. And then cell.pokemon view model. I'm not sure if I did that with you guys. I might have done that while I wasn't recording. So hop into your Pokedex cell and just make sure. Yeah, okay, I think we did do that. Okay. Now we want to change this to Pokemon view model. Okay, so present info view. I don't think we have that. Yeah, that's not right. So we need to present the info view with Pokemon view model. And we're going to say Pokemon view model. Build this. Okay, the errors are shrinking slowly, guys. So let's keep going. It's going to take a little bit more time. I know it's a pain in the butt. Okay, here's a super important one. So we actually need to change these two guys here, Pokemon and filtered Pokemon, to Pokemon view models and filtered Pokemon view models. And this is going to be this. So this is going to create a ton of nasty errors. Yeah, this sucks. Okay, so let's go ahead and start. This is the main spot we need to fix this. So we're going to say self.Pokemon view models. Pokemon.map. And here, just delete that, do an open and closed, do a closure there. And we're going to say return Pokemon view model. And we're going to initialize it with this Pokemon, which is going to be this placeholder value. So that should be all we need to do. Let's build that, see if it works. So that's looking good. Right, so let me go over that really quickly, guys. So this is a function in our API service, and it has a completion block with an array of Pokemon. And before, we were just setting that array of Pokemon with this guy here that we use in our completion block. Now we need to create a Pokemon view models array, right? So we have to map each one of those particular Pokemon into a Pokemon view model. So that's what this function is doing here. So now, let's see, let's change all this stuff around. So let me just go ahead and copy and paste Pokemon view models because we're going to be using that a lot. Pokemon view models.count, Pokemon view models. And that's going to be a little bit better. So now this needs to be filtered Pokemon view models. We're going to change that. Boom. Okay, let's keep going. that. Why isn't this working? Oh, that's why. It's needs to change this type. So it's getting better and better. Just keep going. Oops, Pokemon view models and Pokemon view models. Controller.Pokemon view model. Guys, I know this is like painful to do one by one, but it sort of helps us figure out what's going on where instead of just doing like a change all, which you are more than welcome to do, but for the purpose of this video, I'm changing the stuff one by one. And we are almost done. Okay, so we're going to say filtered Pokemon view models equals Pokemon view models dot filter. So that should be good to go. Okay, now here we can just use the Pokemon we have for our Pokemon view model. Because if you guys remember, we are not going to introduce the Pokemon view model into our service because that's unnecessary. So we're going to say Pokemon guard let Pokemon equal Pokemon view model dot Pokemon else return. Go and build that. And one more error, dismiss info view. So we just need to change this up with view model, Pokemon view model. Build succeeded. Sweet. All right, we do have some comments in our code, but I want to just go ahead and run this, guys, and see if it works. I'm sure we're going to get a ton of crashes. Okay, we're not getting our image into our Pokemon view model class and see what's going on. Okay, so this is the problem here. We don't have this base experience set when we make our initial API call. So this is the completed application. We just want for the initial call to be this image and this name, and then we fetch all the corresponding information only when we need it, right? Because that makes our application more efficient. So all we have to do is take this self.image guy and put it here, right? Because what was happening, guys, was it was hitting this line and it's saying, okay, that's not there, so we're returning out of our function, and that's why it wasn't working. So if we run our code now, that should be good to go, and then we will almost be done. So everything is loading properly. That's looking really good, and this is still working. Now we need to set up this button action and configure this table view and configure that table view for here as well. So let's go ahead and get that done. So in our Pokedex controller, where is that function? No, sorry, it's in our info view, right? Just uncomment these lines, and we're going to say Pokemon view model equals self.Pokemon view model, and delegate.view more info with view model, Pokemon view model. So let's run that and see if it works. So click on this guy, hit view more info, and that is looking really good, guys. Now let's just configure this table view. So let's go to Pokemon stat cell, and we need to uncomment all of this stuff. Then we have our Pokemon view model. So we're going to get some errors here. Okay, so what we can do really quick is just create our Pokemon. Because it has all these attributes, we don't need to introduce our view model to get all those attributes. We can just access the Pokemon, do our view model. So we're going to say guard let Pokemon view model equal self.Pokemon view model else return. Actually, we can just say let Pokemon equal self.viewModel.Pokemon else return. And that build is now going to succeed. And let's see if our table view is working, and it's not. Let's try and figure out why. I know what it is. So let's hop into our info view, and where we can figure out that table view, just hop down into this self or row@. function. We commented this line out, so now we need to say self.pokemon or cell.PokemonViewModel equals self.PokemonViewModel, and then we need to do it in our Pokemon info controller as well. So just go ahead and say cell.PokemonViewModel equals self.PokemonViewModel. Run our code. Oops. Just do that. Run our code, and this should be good to go, guys. And that will be it for our conversion. So long press, that's working nicely. That's looking good as well. My Mac's about to die, so I'm going to wrap this up and just check this here. Something I realized after I initially posted this video, guys, was that we could actually take our view model implementation a step further and remove some of the stress from our main controller, which is this file here. And it's going to be in presenting our info view. So when we present this info view, that code is handled in our controller, which is this method we see here. We can actually handle this code in our view model and then call on that method from our view model. And it's going to save us a ton of code in our controller file, which was sort of the whole point of this view model implementation. In our initial video, we saved ourselves some lines of code in our info view, which is what we see here. But now we want to take it a step further and save ourselves some code in our main controller. So let's go ahead and copy this method, and we're going to add it to our view model, and we're just going to make a couple changes, and it's going to allow us to implement it in our main controller file through our view model. So instead of passing in a Pokemon view model, we're going to pass in a controller. And that is going to be our Pokedex controller, because that's the view we are presenting this info view on top of, so to speak. So here we can just say controller.configure search bar, because through this Pokedex controller we have access to all of its methods and subviews. So we don't need this Pokemon guy anymore. What we do need to do, however, is delete all these self guys. So go ahead and do that with me really quickly. And like I said, guys, this is like an addendum to the original video. I reposted it because I thought it was important enough to add in to actually repost the video. So let's go ahead and now we need to add a couple of values in here, or variables. So we're going to say guard let view equal controller dot view else return, and then we need let info view equal controller dot info view, and let visual effect view equal controller dot visual effect view. Okay, so we just need to make a couple more changes. So the info view's delegate needs to be this controller here. So we're going to say controller there, and we need to change this Pokemon view model guy. So to do that, we are going to say self.pokemon here. So the view model is going to be initialized like this. It's a Pokemon view model that's initialized with whatever Pokemon belongs to this Pokemon view model that we're going to be passing in to our Pokedex controller method. So let's go ahead and do that now. It's going to make more sense once I do it, I promise. So now we can delete all of that code, and now we can say we are passing in a Pokemon view model here when we call on that method. So we're going to say Pokemon view model dot present, or what was that method called? Present info view. Right, so we should have access to that. Let's build our project really quick. Probably going to get an error. Nope, it's good to go. So we should have access to it. Pokemon view model dot present info view in controller self. So really quick before we run the code, when we go, we remember that long press is added to our Pokedex cell, right? So this is the handler for that long press, and that's where we pass in that Pokemon view model. And we set our cell up with the Pokemon view model. So basically, let me run the code and then go through the explanation really quick so it makes sense. So each one of these cells is configured with a Pokemon view model. The name and the image is set up with a Pokemon view model, right? And now when we go to this handle long press, right? This is the handler for when we long press on this cell. It's going to take that Pokemon view model it was configured with and pass it into this delegate method. And then that delegate method gets called, which is in our Pokedex controller. And then it says, okay, take that Pokemon view model that you passed in and present me with the info view, or call on this method. And that's what we just implemented here. So let's see if it works. And we're good to go, guys. That's looking really good. So I really thought it was important to add that in there. That's it saves our controller tons of code. And if you can imagine a controller scaled up with tons of like delegate methods and functionality, implementing your view model is going to take a lot of stress off your controller. So I hope you guys like this video and have a better understanding of the MVVM framework and how it relates to the MVC framework. If you guys liked it, hit subscribe. Please help me grow this channel. Any feedback is welcome, positive, negative. Just please try to keep it constructive. More stuff to come. I'm going to be adding a video series on creating this Pokedex from the ground up, so all this code will make sense. And you guys can look forward to that in a video series that's going to be coming soon. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a great holiday. Peace out, and I'll see you next time.